She held the gold statue tight. The bright lights of Hollywood shined on her face. Jennifer Hudson had just won the biggest award of her life for the movie Dreamgirls. The crowd went quiet as she leaned into the microphone. She did not talk about herself. She spoke to a ghost. She dedicated her win to the woman who never got a fair chance. She gave that moment to Florence Ballard. But here is the sad truth. Florence was not there to see it. She was not there to hear the cheers. The woman with the voice of an angel had already left this world. Think about this. Marvin Gaye called her a hell of a singer. He said she was the strongest voice in the group. Mary Wilson said she sounded just like Etta James or Aretha Franklin. When she opened her mouth, you felt it in your bones. She founded the Supremes. In the 60s, they were bigger than everyone except the Beatles. But fame has a price. Florence was born in 1943 in Detroit. She was the ninth of 15 children. They called her Blondie because of her auburn hair. Her father worked the line at General Motors to put food on the table, but the struggle was real. Imagine a dinner table with 17 plates. That was the reality for Florence Ballard. Her father was a hard worker. Jesse Ballard clocked in every day at General Motors. He stood on the line. He built the cars that drove America. The pay was good for a black man in Detroit in the 1950s. But do the math. Jesse and his wife Lurley had 15 children. Florence was number 9. She was right in the middle of the noise. She was right in the middle of the chaos. Money came into the house, but it flew right back out. There were shoes to buy. There were mouths to feed. The math never quite worked out. The struggle was not just a word. It was a roommate. They moved from house to house. They packed up boxes. They unpacked boxes. Stability was a luxury they could not afford. But here is the deal. Florence had something money could not buy. She had music in her blood. Her father, Jesse, had a dark past. His own grandmother was shot and killed when he was just a baby. A family named Ballard took him in and raised him. He knew what it meant to survive against the odds. He passed that fire down to his daughter. They called her Flo. They called her Blondie. She had light skin and hair that looked auburn in the sun, but her voice was dark and deep. She started singing when she was 5 years old. She sang with her brothers. She sang with her sisters. She sang with her cousins. Picture the scene. A little girl stands in the choir stand at church. The organ plays. The room smells like incense and wood polish. She opens her mouth. A sound comes out that shakes the rafters. It is not a polite sound. It is a churchy sound. That is what the old folks called it. It touched your spirit. It made you feel the pain and the joy all at once. Eventually, the family stopped moving. They settled in the Brewster Douglas housing projects. Now, you have to understand this place. The Brewster projects were legendary. If you saw the movie The Women of Brewster Place, you know the vibe. It was concrete and brick. It was crowded. But it was the heartbeat of Black Detroit. This is where the magic happened. Florence was a teenager now. She walked the halls of the projects with a swagger. She knew she had a gift. She entered talent shows at the local center. She stood on the stage and let it rip. This is where she met Mary Wilson. Mary was another girl from the projects with a dream. She watched Florence sing. She was stunned. Most girls sang nice and sweet. Florence sang like a grown woman. Her voice was so powerful she could not stand close to the microphone. The sound engineer had to wave her back. If she got too close, the equipment would buzz and pop. She had lungs like steel. A teacher at their school heard them. He had a different idea. He heard the high notes Florence could hit. He wanted them to sing opera. He wanted them to be classical stars in gowns and recital halls. But the streets of Detroit were singing a different song. Radio stations were playing rhythm and blues. The sound of Motown was starting to bubble under the surface. Florence did not want to sing opera. She wanted to sing soul. She wanted to make people dance. She wanted to make people cry. Mary and Florence became best friends. They were inseparable. They navigated the tough streets of the East Side together. They shared clothes. They shared secrets. And one day, they made a pact. This moment is crucial. Gravity pulls hardest when you try to climb alone. The girls knew this, so they made a promise. They looked each other in the eye. They swore an oath. If one of them got a break, she would help the other. If a manager knocked on Mary's door, Mary would say she had a friend. If a scout found Florence, Florence would bring Mary along. It was a blood oath. No one gets left behind. We go together, or we do not go at all. This promise was pure. It was born out of love and friendship. It was the kind of loyalty you only find when you have nothing else to lose. But wait, it gets deeper. Florence was the leader. Make no mistake. In the beginning, it was her energy that drove them. She was the one with the voice that stopped traffic. She was the one with the fire. She met a man named Milton Jenkins. He was a manager. He was looking for talent. He saw Florence and her sister Maxine. He saw the potential. The door was cracking open. A tiny sliver of light was shining into the projects. Florence remembered the promise. She remembered the girl who stood by her side. She was ready to take the next step. She was ready to form a group. But open loops are dangerous things. They did not know that the music business is a machine. It chews up friendship. It spits out betrayal. Florence thought her voice was her shield. She thought her talent would protect her. She thought the promise would last forever. She was the strongest singer in the group. Marvin Gaye said it. The Temptations said it. She had the grit of her father. She had the soul of the church. She had the loyalty of a soldier. Florence Ballard was the foundation. She was the spark that would light the fire of the Supremes. She was about to build a castle that would touch the sky, but she did not know that the ground beneath her feet was made of sand. The higher they built, the more it would shift. The girl from the Brewster Projects was about to become a queen, but every queen has a target on her back. The pavement of the Brewster Projects was hard and cold, but the stage at the Copacabana was soft and warm. Florence Ballard had walked a long road. She went from sharing a dinner table with 16 people to dining with kings and queens. The promise she made with Mary Wilson in the hallway of the projects was no longer a whisper. It was a scream heard around the world. Picture the year 1964. The radio was changing. The airwaves crackled with a new sound. It was the sound of young America. And right at the front were three girls from Detroit. They called themselves the Supremes. But it did not happen overnight. They worked for it. They scrubbed floors. They clapped their hands until they were raw. They sang background vocals for other artists who had made it. They sat in the lobby of Hitsville, USA, every single day. They waited for Berry Gordy to notice them. They were the no-hit Supremes. People laughed at them. They said they would never make it. But Florence had that fire. She had the voice that could knock down a wall. Then the magic happened. They recorded a song called Where Did Our Love Go? The beat was simple. The stomping of feet on a wooden board, the hand claps. It was hypnotic. It hit the radio like a lightning bolt. It went to #1, and then it happened again. Baby Love went to #1. Come See About Me went to #1. Stop in the Name of Love went to #1. Back in My Arms Again went to #1. 5 times in a row. They were unstoppable. The charts belonged to them. The girls from the projects were now standing on top of the mountain. Here is the deal. The transcript tells us a simple fact. Throughout the 60s, the Supremes broke all types of records. The only group in the world that was hotter was the Beatles. Think about that. 4 guys from England and 3 black girls from Detroit. They were the 2 biggest forces on the planet. But for Florence, it was more than just records. It was about respect. She was the quiet warrior. She had the big voice, but she also had the big laugh. She was the one who kept the spirit alive. When they performed, she stood tall. She wore the heavy gowns with sequins that scratched her skin. She wore the wigs that were piled high like crowns. She put on the false eyelashes that felt like heavy curtains. She transformed. The girl called Blondie became a goddess. The money started to roll in. The math at the dinner table finally worked out. Florence bought a house for her family. She bought a Cadillac. She smelled the leather of the new seats. She felt the power of the engine. She drove through the streets of Detroit, and people waved. They saw her as a hero. She proved that you could start with nothing and end up with everything. But the impact went deeper than money. Imagine a living room in Alabama or Mississippi in 1965. A black family gathers around a small black and white television. They turn the dial to The Ed Sullivan Show. Usually, they see people who do not look like them. But tonight, the curtains part. 3 beautiful black women walk out. They are elegant. They are poised. They are not playing maids or servants. They are the stars. Florence Ballard stood on that stage. She looked into the camera. She told every little black girl in America that she was beautiful. She told them they mattered. This was the power of the Supremes. They broke down doors that had been locked for centuries. They played in clubs where black people used to be banned. They stayed in hotels that used to turn them away. They forced the world to look at them. The crowd screamed so loud it sounded like a jet engine. Florence soaked it all in. She had made it. She had kept her promise to Mary. They were together. They were famous. They were rich. But fame is a bright light, and bright lights cast dark shadows. While the cameras flashed, something was shifting. The machinery of Motown was moving. The executives in the suits were looking at the group. They saw 3 girls, but they wanted 1 star. They looked at Diana Ross. They liked her skinny frame. They liked her pop voice. They pushed her to the front. They pushed Florence to the back. Florence felt the change. She felt the cold wind blowing. She was the founder. She was the one who named the group. She was the one with the big, churchy voice that Marvin Gaye loved. But in the boardroom, voice mattered less than image. The gowns got tighter. The schedule got harder. The pressure was heavy. Florence tried to smile. She tried to sing her harmonies. She tried to remember the fun they used to have in the Brewster projects. But the fun was fading. The laughter was being replaced by silence. The world saw the glitz. They saw the glamour. They saw the smiles on the magazine covers. But wait, it gets worse. Florence began to see her dream turning into a nightmare. She was the queen who was slowly being pushed off her throne. The silence in the car rides became deafening. The looks between the girls became cold. The peak was high. The view was beautiful. But the air was thin up there. And Florence was finding it hard to breathe. She did not know it yet, but the fall was coming. And gravity pulls hardest on those at the very top. The cracks in the glass finally shattered. It did not happen all at once. It happened 1 cut at a time. The first cut was deep. Berry Gordy made a decision. He decided the group was no longer the Supremes. He wanted to change the name. He called them Deanna Ross and the Supremes. Think about that. Florence Ballard founded the group. She named the group. She picked the songs in the beginning. Now, she was just a backup singer in her own band. She was an employee. Diana was the boss. The resentment grew like a weed. Florence was a proud woman. She had that Detroit grit. She did not know how to bow down. She did not know how to be invisible. So she fought back the only way she knew how. She started to drink. The alcohol numbed the pain. It made the insults easier to swallow. It made the silence in the car rides bearable, but it also made her sloppy. She missed rehearsals. She showed up late. She gained weight. The tiny dresses did not fit right anymore. The other girls looked at her with pity, or maybe it was disgust. But wait, it gets worse. The date was July 1st, 1967. The group was in Las Vegas. They were set to perform at the Flamingo Hotel. This was the big time. The lights were bright. The names were on the marquee. But inside the hotel, a tragedy was unfolding. Florence showed up. Her stomach hurt. She was tired. She had been drinking. The other girls were already dressed. But there was a fourth person in the room. Her name was Cindy Birdsong. She looked a little like Florence. She sounded a little like Florence. And she was wearing Florence's gown. Picture the scene. Florence looked at the mirror. Then she looked at Cindy. She realized the truth. They had been planning this. They had a replacement ready to go. They were just waiting for her to stumble. Florence went on stage that night, but her heart was broken. She performed with a heavy spirit. The next day, Berry Gordy called a meeting. He did not mince words. He told Florence she was out. He told her to go home. She packed her bags. She walked out of the Flamingo Hotel. She walked out of the spotlight. She walked into the desert heat. She was 24 years old. She was a millionaire on paper, but she was about to learn a hard lesson. Here is the deal. When you leave the machine destroys you. Motown made her sign a contract. They gave her a settlement. They said they would pay her $160,000, but they would pay it out slowly over years. They told her she could not use the name, the Supremes. They stripped her of her history. Florence tried to go solo. She signed with ABC Records. She released a few songs. It doesn't matter how I say it, was a good song, but the radio stations would not play it. People whispered that Motown blocked her. They said Berry Gordy had long arms. He controlled the radio. He controlled the press. He made sure the door stayed shut. The money started to run out. Florence had a husband named Tommy Chapman. He was a chauffeur. He tried to help her manage her money. But the sharks were circling. Her lawyer was a man she trusted. But trust is dangerous in the music business. The money from the settlement disappeared. The lawyer claimed fees. He claimed expenses. The cash drained away like water in a cracked cup. Then came the darkness. By 1971, Florence was in trouble. She sued Motown. She sued Berry Gordy. She wanted her money. She wanted her royalties. But judges do not listen to rhythm and blues. They listen to contracts. The judge threw out her case. He said she had already signed away her rights. She lost the lawsuit. She lost the hope. And then she lost the house. Picture this, the beautiful home in Detroit, the one she bought for her family, the symbol of her success. The bank came for it. Foreclosure is a cold word. It means you have to pack your boxes. It means you have to leave your memories behind. Florence moved into a smaller house, then an apartment, Then she had nowhere to go. By 1975, the woman who sang for the Queen of England was standing in a line. It was not a line for a club, it was a line for government cheese. Florence Ballard applied for welfare. She had 3 daughters to feed. She had no husband. They had separated. She had no career. She had no money. She walked into the welfare office. She hoped no one would recognize her. She kept her head down. She wore plain clothes. But fame is a tattoo. You cannot wash it off. People whispered, "Is that Flo? Is that the girl from the Supremes?" The shame burned her skin. She was 31 years old. She felt like she was 100. Her body was failing. The alcohol had done damage. She had high blood pressure. Her legs hurt. She could barely walk some days. Gravity pulls hardest when you hit the bottom. One day, she was walking down the street. A photographer saw her. He snapped a picture. The photo ran in the newspaper. It showed Florence. She looked heavy. She looked tired. She looked broken. The headline was cruel. It mocked her, fall from grace. The world laughed. They saw a tragedy. They did not see the mother trying to feed her kids. They did not see the artist who was robbed. They only saw the failure. But Florence was not dead yet. Inside that broken body, there was still a spark. There was still that churchy voice. There was still that fire from the Brewster projects. She decided to fight one last time. She got a settlement from her lawyer, a tiny amount, but enough to buy a small house. She started to talk about a comeback. She did a TV interview. She looked into the camera. She smiled. She said she was ready to sing again. She wanted to reclaim her throne, but open loops are dangerous. The story does not always give you a happy ending. Sometimes the body just cannot keep up with the spirit. The date was February 21st, 1976. The winter in Detroit was cold. The wind howled through the streets. Florence was at home. She told her sister she did not feel well. Her limbs felt heavy. Her chest felt tight. She thought she just needed rest. She thought she could sleep it off. She did not know that the clock was ticking. She did not know that the silence was about to become permanent. The music had stopped a long time ago, but now the heart was about to stop too. The ambulance screamed through the winter air. The lights flashed red against the dirty snow of Detroit, but the silence inside the vehicle was louder than the siren. Florence Ballard was gone. The doctors called it coronary thrombosis. A blood clot formed. It blocked the path to her heart. The muscle that powered the Supremes stopped beating. She was 32 years old. Think about that number. 32. She had lived 1,000 lives in those short years. She went from the crowded table in the projects to the Royal Palace in London and back to a cold house in Detroit. But here is the ugly truth. The moment she died, the world changed its tune. The same newspapers that printed photos of her on welfare now wrote glowing tributes. They called her a legend. They called her a tragedy. The reporters who mocked her weight suddenly praised her voice. The hypocrisy was thick enough to choke on. Yesterday, she was a failure in their eyes. Today, she was a martyr. Motown issued a statement. They called her one of their own. They spoke of love and loss, but the people of Detroit knew better. They remembered the lawsuits. They remembered the poverty. They remembered the silence when she needed help. The funeral took place at New Bethel Baptist Church. Picture the scene. It was chaos. Thousands of fans flooded the streets. They climbed on cars to get a better look. They pushed against police barricades. They did not come just to mourn. They came to witness the final act of a drama. The church was packed tight. The air was hot and heavy. The four tops stood ready to carry the casket. Aretha Franklin sat in the pews. The royalty of black music was there to pay respects. But then a limousine pulled up. A hush fell over the crowd. Then a low rumble started. It sounded like thunder. Diana Ross stepped out. She wore a fur coat. She looked like a movie star. But the crowd did not cheer. They booed. Someone shouted angry words. They blamed her. They blamed Motown. They saw the dream girl who made it, and they saw the dream girl in the box. The contrast was sharp like a knife. Diana rushed into the church. She sat in the front row. She took one of Florence's daughters on her knee. The cameras flashed. It was the picture of the year. But wait, it gets deeper. After the flowers wilted, the reality set in. The crowds went home. The cameras went away. Florence left behind 3 little girls. They had no father in the house. They had no mother, and they had no money. The estate was empty. There was no secret stash of gold. The royalties were gone. The settlement money was gone. The bank accounts were dry. This is the price of fame. It eats you whole and leaves nothing for your children but a famous last name. Years passed. The story of the Supremes became a legend. People hummed Baby Love and Stop in the name of love. They danced at weddings. They smiled at the memories. But the ghost of Florence Ballard haunted the music. You could hear her in the background vocals. You could feel her spirit in the high notes. She was the anchor that held the ship, even after they cut the rope. Then came the movie Dreamgirls. The world watched a character named Effie White. She was loud. She was proud. She was kicked out of her group. She struggled. She fought. Jennifer Hudson played the role. She stood on screen and sang until the walls shook. She won the Golden Globe. She won the Oscar. And in that moment, the loop finally closed. Jennifer Hudson stood on the stage. She held the gold statue. She looked at the world and said the name that had been whispered for 30 years. This is for Florence Ballard. The applause was deafening. The world finally gave Florence her flowers. But here is the sad part. Flowers do not smell sweet when you are 6 feet under. The statue does not pay the bills for the children left behind. The applause does not warm a cold house in Detroit. Florence Ballard had the voice of an angel. She gave everything to the music. She built the bridge that others walked across. She never got a fair chance. That is what Jennifer Hudson said. And she was right. But in the end, the music survives. The records still spin. And if you listen closely to those old tracks, you can still hear her. She is the one with the churchy sound. She is the one with the fire. She is the one who never really left. The girl from the Brewster Projects finally found her peace. The silence is over. The queen has reclaimed her crown. And this time, no one can take it away. History tried to erase Florence Ballard. The music business tried to silence her. They took her name. They took her money. They even took her microphone. But here is the deal. You cannot kill a legacy. You cannot bury a sound that comes from the soul. Florence Ballard was more than just a tragic figure. She was the blueprint. Every girl group that came after the Supremes stands on her shoulders. Without Florence, there is no Destiny's Child. Without Florence, there is no TLC. She showed the world that black girls from the projects could walk with queens. She proved that elegance does not belong to one zip code. She paid the ultimate price for that lesson. When you put a needle on those old vinyl records, listen closely. Do not just listen to the lead vocal. Listen to the harmony. That deep, powerful sound underneath is Florence. It is the sound of Detroit. It is the sound of struggle. It is the sound of dignity. Marvin Gaye was right. She was a hell of a singer. She was the strongest of them all because she carried the weight of the group on her back. Jennifer Hudson reminded the world of a simple truth. Florence never got a fair chance, but today we give her that chance. We give her the respect she earned. We remember the mother, the fighter, and the founder. Fame fades, money runs out, the applause eventually stops, but the truth lasts forever. Florence Ballard started as a dreamer in the Brewster Projects. She ended as a legend. Think about this the next time you feel overlooked. Think about Flo. She kept her head up when the world pushed her down. She reminds us that your value does not come from a contract. It comes from who you are inside. Some stories end without closure, but dignity doesn't need applause. Do you remember the first time you heard the Supremes? Do you think Florence finally got the justice she deserved? Share your memories in the comments below. We want to hear from you.